everyone, this is Bridget Aduadier from Theogony, the student-run media organization at T.C. Williams High School, and I'm here in the ACPS TV Media Studio, and welcome to another episode of Behind the Headlines. With me, I have Michael Pope from the Virginia Public Radio, Denise Dunbar from the Alexandria Times, and Dan Brandel from the Alexandria Gazette Packet. Our first topic is an update on the metro shutdown. WMATA extended its construction period for another 6 days, and there's been a lot of controversy around that. Actually, from our recent issue of the Alexandria Times, Mayor Wilson, he said, the announcement really was dumbfounding for us, especially the way it came out without any discussion. Can you comment on that, Denise?
Sure. I think this goes back, there's a pretty long history of dissatisfaction between our city leaders and WMATA. Some of it relates to the Potomac Yard metro system. Some of it relates to the partial shutdowns in the past due to the track work. Some of it relates to the fact that an Alexandria resident died on metro a few years ago because of safety issues that they had. So I think that you have to understand that our elected officials are starting from a perspective of not a lot of patience with shenanigans or perceived incompetence or lack of courtesy or anything else from people at WMATA. So I think some of that probably informed the mayor's comments, and the other counselor who was really upset about it was John Chapman.
Right. You found out about it through Facebook, he said.
Right. I mean, that's just really inappropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah, there seriously is a lack of communication here. From the perspective of the city council members, they felt like they should have known about this earlier. You know, but the timing here is that the WMATA officials knew about this extension a month before the city council members found out about it. So they felt like they were out of the loop. They should have known about it. They could have planned better for it, and that didn't happen. And so what happened is there was this really tense city council meeting. Well, it was tense for the WMATA officials because they were being yelled at the whole time.
They were, yes.
And so the city council members were taking out their frustration on the WMATA officials. But you know, when this shutdown happens, this is going to be unprecedented. It's all the way from Memorial Day to Labor Day. And so while there's been lots of talk about this in advance, when it actually happens, people are going to realize that how serious this is. And also, it's when it extends past Labor Day, that's when things are really going to get hairy, because you know, even in perfect circumstances, that week after the Labor Day holiday is just intense, insane with traffic. And so you take that environment and you remove metro from that, it's going to be ugly.
Dan, what do you think the impact of the extension and the lack of communication on that is how is that gonna influence the community? And as Michael said, the traffic is gonna be really busy during that time.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, one of the main, reasons that the council people were so upset about it was because metro is sort of the economic lifeblood of this city and the whole region. So, losing it post Labor Day is really, they're really worried about the economic impact of losing business, especially traffic for small businesses. As far as the sort of dysfunction between the bodies, yeah, I mean, WMATA has been building up a lack of trust for long before I ever arrived in this area. That's got to go back decades. So this certainly isn't going to help that. And Alexandria's experience with shutting down stations to fix them is just the first piece of a larger system-wide puzzle. So other jurisdictions are going to have to deal with WMATA, and they're probably going to, watching Alexandria's experience, they're probably going to be a lot more wary and a lot more skeptical. The only thing I'd add to some of the things that have been said is that Mayor Wilson made a comment, something to the effect that when he was grilling the WMATA officials, he said something to the effect that I naively assumed that you guys had done due diligence to, plan for the scope of work here, and I had to, which is a fair thing to say, but part of me would also ask, well, why did you naively assume? You've been there for 10 years. I would have liked to see our own officials prod a little harder in the first place to get some of those details, not just to be irate on the back end.
The 1 week timeline to do this station fix is probably not realistic as well. And so
Right.
I
True.
think that,
Yeah.
you know, the whole larger project is likely to take longer than they thought, and this particular fix is also likely to take longer. And so when you start from a place of skepticism and then they drop this on you and then give what seems like a wildly unrealistic timeline for it, it's just, you know, it's a recipe for distrust.
So both sides kind of are at fault here, and you know, as I was reading this, you know, there really wasn't a clear reason as to why. Like, I heard there were further issues with Braddock Road, since Eisenhower, King Street, and Braddock Road all going to be shut down this summer. Do you know anything more about why they had to extend that, other than the unrealistic deadline?
Well, supposedly there was a problem with the platform at Braddock that went back a long time. I actually had not heard of that prior to this. I knew nothing about
The
it.
platform level, I know this because my wife commutes there every day, but like the platform level and the train level don't line up. So what the chief operating officer, or whatever the official was who was getting grilled on Tuesday, said was that they have to, you know, get underneath this big, you know, concrete and steel platform, basically cut out the supports, jack it up, and change the levels, and then tie it all back together structurally with concrete and steel, and that whole process. He said it was 1.6 million pounds of platform that they have to like hydraulically jack up and change the level of all the supports underneath.
Which they say they can do in a week, but they've been wrong about the timeline
Right.
before, so
Right.
you
Yeah.
get back into this cycle of why do we believe them now?
Yeah, and then you talk, like, we're talking about the economic impacts. I mean, for Metro to shut down for a week extra, like, I mean, that's a bummer, right?
Right,
But it's a
yeah.
week. But if this
But
turns
it's
into like,
also after Labor Day
right,
weekend,
I mean, it's
so
a
not
very
just
busy
any
week.
it's a crazy week.
I don't mean to
Right.
make light of it, but
Yeah.
I'm saying, like, if you start to talk about a month or something, the mayor said,
Right.
quite rightly, he said, if this turns into something like months, it's going to be a disaster. The word he
Yeah.
used was disaster, as I recall.
Moving on to our next topic of the city budget negotiations, Dash drivers and ACPS school custodians have been fighting for better pay and benefits amid the recent fiscal year 2020 budget that's about to come out. Michael, can you elaborate on, you know, the fact that apparently their requests could not be considered for funding? You know, the custodians asked for additional funding for the custodians to keep their jobs, and the Dash drivers also spoke at multiple city council meetings for their pay.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting that there are two things going on there. One with the custodians with the school system, and the other with the bus drivers. The thing that strikes me is that during the budget time of year, you always hear this expression that budgets are an expression of values, and that you pass a budget and it's the expression of the values of the city. And Alexandria, you know, likes to think of itself as being progressive and democratic and left-leaning, and you hear this talk all the time about how liberal People's Republic of Alexandria is. And yet when you look at this budget, what are the values that it's reflecting? That you're going to take your ACPS custodial workers and fire like 24 of them, and take their
right.
good paying jobs that they've got benefits and retirement plans, and essentially Uberize them and privatize them. So that's the values that are being reflected in our city. And then also you've got this issue with the Dash bus drivers. I mean, they are organizing to try to get better pay, and that's essentially not happening in this budget, at least not yet. And it seems like it's probably too late for that to happen. However, they do have a playing card here, which is
Yeah, the shutdown.
that the shutdown is happening, right? And so these bus drivers actually have some leverage that they wouldn't have in a normal year. So I'd expect that to play out perhaps a little differently than people expect it to right now.
A lot of
Very
people who
interesting.
take Dash are going to be displaced, you know.
Right.
What impact do you think that's going to have on the community, Denise?
Oh, I think if the Dash bus drivers go on strike, it would be an enormous impact on the community.
Right.
You know, as Dan said, I mean, with the upcoming metro shutdown, you know, I don't really think everybody's going to be going to work via scooters, particularly if they're in, you know, other parts of Northern Virginia, or, you know, going across the bridge. So, yes, I think it would have a significant impact. I think another interesting facet of the values comment that Michael made about the custodial issue is a TC custodian was just named the Alexandria Support
Right,
Staff
yeah.
Member of the Year because he tutors students and works with them outside of his job in addition to being a custodian. So to think that on the one hand, you're honoring the contribution of somebody like this, but then you're saying, okay, because we're going to save X amount of money, we're actually going to, probably not him, but lop a lot of his colleagues, their jobs away. That's a difficult place to be in if I were a school administrator. On the other hand, you have a lot of competing interests, and you want to provide the best education that you can for the students,
Right.
and whatever money you save from what budget decisions you make is money you can spend on something else. So I see both sides of that. I just think the optics of it are pretty bad.
Michael, how long do you think it will take for both the dash drivers and the school custodians to get their requests realized, since they missed this period to get adequate funding?
Well, there's two different issues here. One of them is the custodial workers in ACPS. And so the school system has basically already made the decision. They're going to privatize those people. And so that's, although they made that decision in the past and it never came to fruition. So it's possible there could be just some sort of bureaucratic morass that prevents that from happening. There is some history of that. On the other side of that is the dash bus drivers who are in the process of potentially organizing a union. And so, if that does actually happen, then they could really start pressing and have a strike at a time when it would be the worst
Right.
possible time for the city. So, there is some potential drama on the horizon on that story.
If I were a betting man, I'd say, the school board has, I think they're facing considerable political pressure to find the money. And I know I've heard whisperings that they're working on moving stuff around in their budget to find the money to make up for the gap. And they have a chance after the city council passes its budget next week. Then the school board has to finally adopt its
Right.
budget shortly thereafter. So they have a chance to come back. And if I were a bet man, I'd say they would. Dash, I don't know. That one's trickier. In the budget process for the city just recently, they did what's called the addition and deletion part,
Right,
which is
yeah.
the city manager, who's the CEO of the city, presents a big budget, and then the city council talks about it for a couple months, and then they can tweak it. They can add stuff or take stuff away from what the city manager proposed. Now, they made 15 suggestions that were mostly just tiny nibbling around the edges, like 5 digits here, maybe 6 digits there. Nobody put forward anything about adding anything in for
Right.
dash pay, even though they've known about this organizing thing since last November. So I will say that was an interesting omission.
Especially when you consider the things that were put in that seem to be perhaps not quite as
Right.
necessary.
Yeah.
Lights on King Street, Christmas lights?
Lights on King Street, but also maybe this isn't the time to do the green buildings thing. There were a number of things. And the other aspect of this, which hasn't really been talked about, but there's actually $600,000 of found money that when they re-estimated revenues, there's just under 600,000 more dollars to spend, which is why the cuts don't have to be as deep as the new addition. So, there's money there that if they wanted to spend all of that money on, the custodians or on dash drivers, they could have done that.
Denise, do you know how Dash, specifically the company and the operators, are dealing with the union?
I actually don't know how they're dealing with it. I just know from the what I read about the plight of the drivers. I personally was shocked, that there were some of
Right,
these people that had been working there 15 or 20 years, and their pay was $20 an hour, and no benefits.
Especially compared to other cities.
Right. I
I
found it appalling.
yeah.
Can you say your question again? What?
How has Dash, the company and the operators, have been dealing with
The
this?
union?
Yeah, the union.
Well, right. So they took a vote in November under federal rules and overseen by a federal entity that deals with labor organizing. They being the Dash drivers, voted to select the Amalgamated Transit Union to be
Right.
their representative in a process called collective bargaining. So the union they are currently they've been at it for a couple months now, and I'm not aware that they've made a whole lot of headway, but the Dash management, represented by their lawyers, and then the drivers, represented by the Amalgamated Transit Union, have been coming to the table, you know, I don't know, it's been several, 8 times or something so far, trying to hash out a deal. So they have until November to hash out a deal. So that's I mean, they're interacting with each other through a formal bargaining process. I don't know if that answers your question. Trying to reach an agreement about pay and vacation days and all kinds of stuff like that.
There seems like there is a lot of labor unrest in the city, and unfortunately, that's all that we have for today. I'm Bridget Aduadier, and these are my guests. Thank you for coming, and this is Behind the Headlines. Have a great day.